I can't believe you're not a big fan of Phil Collins. I mean, I know that has nothing to do with this movie, like, at all. I know, because initially I was going to play Mad World, you know,
I love that.
it's a great song, but it's so depressing that, like, I can't open a show like that. Can you imagine if I just start playing some sad shit and then I'm like, oh, come back, you know, and like start like going at it? I can't do that. I can't.
It worked for that one episode of the Cleveland Show.
Fair enough. Welcome back to Back to the Classic, a cinematic movie podcast, which expects the iconic films of 20 years ago. I am your host, Danger Neff, and with me, unfortunately for his last week, is my boy,
Lund Hairston. I'm back.
How you doing, partner?
Doing great. I mean, got to watch one of my favorite movies.
So this week we decided to change it up just slightly, and I'll tell you why. It's Lund's last week. I'm not sure when's the next opportunity he's going to come on. We have plans for a December episode for sure, but I wanted it to be fair because, again, with all these little hiatuses that we sometimes take, it's kind of few far and in between, and I want it to be that if somebody's going to be speaking on a topic that I know that Jay, for example, isn't going to be 100 down with, then I'm going to pick Lund to do so. This week, we're actually doing a movie that's not 20 years old exactly. It's 19 years old. But I think it's close enough to a classic to call it a classic, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of skip the rules. I'm sure I'll get yelled at by Jay when we talk about that, but I'm definitely excited. So let me ask you, Lund, how was this experience through the Zoom meeting and co-hosting with me? I know we've co-hosted before plenty of times, but how was this time around with the whole Zoom meeting thing and all the little stress that COVID-19 has kind of kicked in?
Oh, man, you know what? It's actually worked out pretty well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like going to the studio with you guys. We get a chance to kind of meet up and warm up and kind of do all that. But, I mean, this works. And we can definitely keep doing it, you know. Hey, this train don't stop. So whether it's the webcam or the cameras. What's up?
Did you dye your hair?
No, just looks good.
Dye your hair.
Oh, I don't know. I think,
before we were talking.
I mean, if I let it go for long enough and I'm outside, it starts to get light, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Max, good on you, bud. This week, the DC fandom kicked in, and as you guys know, Jay and I shared a live video on our Instagram to kind of talk about a little bit of the big thing that kicked in. And really, there's two things I really want to cover on this fandom thing. The first thing I want to touch on is Wonder Woman 84's, I guess, final trailer, but more specifically, the appearance of Cheetah and our reactions to that. So, Lon, go ahead and kick it off. What is your reaction to Kristen Wiig as Cheetah?
I mean, first of all, I really loved Kristen Wiig. You know, I loved her in The Martian. I loved her in Ghostbusters. I know that's probably a unpopular opinion there. You know, I've just been a fan of the actress for a while, you know. I really like the idea for transitioning into like a superhero action type of role. I mean, supervillain action type of role. You know, I have some issues though. Like, you see it, and I'm getting some. You know, I think we're talking about this. I got some mad Selena Kyle vibes off of her initial kind of not superhuman opinion or not superhuman appearance. Which I mean, I guess Catwoman. She's a cat. It's kind of weird.
No, that's actually a pretty fair take.
Yeah.
Glad you pointed that out, but go ahead.
Then, you know, like she kind of, you know, puts on a leather jacket. She's running around being a badass. Okay, that's cool. Tap into that. and then at the end, you know, you see like her CG'd as like a full Thundercat person, and
Right.
I mean, you know, my only issue is like I understand it's DC, you know, the whole smoke and darkness thing that they got going on, the whole, you know, Batman's our guy, so everything has to be dark, but it's like light it up. Like, you know, if you're gonna have a essentially, you know, like one of the characters from Cats running around, we'll just like show it off, bright, you know, in bright light and make it look good, you know.
Right.
But
So go ahead, finish up.
I was gonna say, but you know, maybe you know they'll change some of that by the time the movie actually starts. Maybe we'll get like a good scene where all the action looks really clear. I don't know. That's where I'm at right now.
Right. So Cheetah, because when I was introduced to kind of to just comics in general, the first area that I actually was introduced to wasn't like it wasn't really like X. I mean, X Men was a big part of that, obviously. The other part was Super Friends and the Legion of Doom,
Oh,
right?
okay, yeah.
So I know Cheetah from that, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of followed somewhat a little bit afterwards. And Cheetah is like she's basically fueled by her jealousy and hatred of Wonder Woman, and she's like this supposed to be like ferocious strength, and she brings a lot of a lot of intensity to every single battle. So it's like
Yeah, she's very animalistic. You know, strength,
so
speed, agility.
right, so it forces Diana to really have to kind of step up her game every time that she kind of faces her. Um, it was never like a match though. It really wasn't. Even though she was like you know that main enemy. Now I always viewed it as Cheetah views Wonder Woman as an enemy, and Wonder Woman views Cheetah as like a fallen friend. It's kind of
Right.
like it's kind of like the Harvey Dent thing a little bit.
Sure.
You know, because apparently, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to get this wrong, but she was powered by like a plant god at times, you know, to kind of gain her powers, and it kind of turned her very savage, and then she like really regretted that, you know,
Yeah.
and then she was like, "Why can't I just be as strong as you?" Pretty much. Um, I am excited for Kristen Wiig, obviously. I love her in Bridesmaids. Like
Oh my God. Yeah, I love that movie.
that's one of those movies that that every time I see it, I immediately picture her and I picture Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah.
Um, my only thing with with this is that you hit a good point on the Selena Kyle, but you also hit a really good point on that Cats thing because the movie Cats, the disaster of 2019 is what I'm going to call it. Was like supposed to be this like remarkable thing, and it was supposed to turn like Jason Derulo came out with something saying, "I thought this was finally going to make me that star." It was
Yeah.
like, no, it made you like a fucking embarrassment. Um, and I don't want to say that I necessarily get those exact vibes, but they kind of linger a little bit.
You
Um,
know, yeah. Like the sad thing is, like, I think there's definitely something with that kind of technology. Like, you know, like we've had, you know, CG mock-ups of actors, right? And we've had practical effects and combinations of the both. And this idea that essentially we can kind of like map out an actor, put a CG overlay over them, but we still get like their real-time audio, their real-time movements. You
sure,
know, like there's something super appealing about that, right? And even if you think about the concept of taking a human being, you know, and you know, putting like a animal anthropomorphized like overlay over them, or just any kind of thing. You know, I mean, look, how dope did Thanos look? You know, in Infinity War. You know, like how dope have we seen so many, you know, actors with their suits on? They're essentially mostly CG'd on. Like, yeah, that could be really good. I think in the case of Cats, you know, like you never want to be the first person to do anything, right? Because
right, and I think a part of that is like her fur because it's just kind of wavy. The other part of it, and this is really my biggest issue with it, is the lighting. I don't know what it is. I don't know why they do this,
it's
but
DC Final Fight
right,
lighting.
I
You know, you
understand. I understand that it's dark, so the lighting's going to be dark. But it's like, dude, I need to see. Why is it that Shazam, okay, was Shazam, which did have some CGI, but not CGI faces, took an entire final fight at night, sure, at a carnival where there were some lights on, but there were points where they weren't around lighting, and yet I could see everything that's going on,
Right.
understand it. This, like, again, they do this thing where it's just kind of like a blur, and I'm trying to basically say, okay, what exactly is going on here? Who's dealing the blows? How big is the damage becoming? Is it that Cheetah is kind of outclassing Wonder Woman a little bit, or is Wonder Woman toying
Yeah.
with, and
Yeah. Like. Yeah.
it just needs, like, it needs a light bulb in the back, to, like, for me to be able to fully see everything that's going on. Look, it's a CGI is shit. Comic books aren't necessarily like in dark pastel colors that you can't determine what's going on each panel. They're colorful, they're bright, they're look at you, you're wearing an orange shirt, I'm wearing black, but I have, the white background. I have lighting, natural lighting. And when you can't see me, I got this fucking lamp so you can even see me even further. That's what I'm saying. Give me some fucking lighting. Please.
Yeah, I think there's something hilarious about the fact that, like, pre all the new sort of DC movie things we've gotten, like, the last thing before that was a Batman movie where the main fight took place in the middle of the day. But, like, everything since then has been, like, these fights at night. And I think there must be something about CG where it's just, like, put a, like, blue-gray background with a lot of smoke because I don't know, maybe it's something with the CG because, like, essentially that's how BVS ended. That's more or less how Justice League ended. That's how, I mean, even Shazam, you said it's like, okay, it looks clear. They did the colors well. Still, it was kind of like a big gray smoke monster. Uh, it's like, like if it's not a Batman movie, you don't need to have the final fight be in some pitch blacked out valley or at midnight or something.
I'll give you the smoke monsters. Yeah, they're smoke monsters, okay? They're no different than the Lost Smoke monsters. But at least I could clearly tell, like, what part of the smoke was an arm and the other one was a penis. I could clearly see, like, all that's going on. All I'm saying is that I need to determine and understand what side of the torso I'm looking at with Cheetah, because all I see is spots.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, really, I feel like they could fix just the colors and it worked. So
I'm there with you.
Let's see. Yeah, let's see what they do.
All right, moving on to the second portion of this, the Batman trailer. So, real quick, I want to discuss very, very, very briefly something that kind of like irks me a little bit. Okay, they hyped this, right? They hyped Matt Reeves directing, and then when they started announcing the cast, everybody was like, huh? But then, like, they kept mentioning parts of the cast, and they're like, all right, yeah, whatever, right? Like, okay, they mentioned, like, Jeffrey Wright. Everybody felt pretty okay with that. Commissioner Gordon. They mentioned Colin Farrell as Penguin, which you totally get to see in this, but you have to really pay attention. Paul Dano as Riddler. I'm like, great. This sounds great. They mentioned Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. And I'm like, that's a great casting there. And then they mentioned Robert Pattinson as Batman. And a lot of people had question marks. And when we first got the news of it, I had questions as well. But as I kind of watched more Robert Pattinson stuff, because I have to, I kind of was really feeling it. But my question is an announcement they made right before they dropped the trailer. They were like, oh, by the way, this is not going to be part of the DCEU. We're totally bringing back Ben Affleck as Batman, and he's going to be in the Flash Paradox movie along with Michael Keaton. With all this hype that you decide to give me, with all this hype that you decided to make me churn a little bit, what the fuck was the point of that? Like, to suddenly turn around and just say, hey, by the way, this isn't part of the DCEU. feels to me that you don't have confidence in this product. I mean, you
Right.
already said there's going to be 3 movies of this. Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it be part of DCEU?
Um, yeah, man. Like, I think a lot of that has to do with that kind of issue of like Ben Affleck, right? Like, I like Ben Affleck as Batman. I like his Bruce Wayne. I mean, I feel like his characterization was bad in some of the movies, but I think they've also have it where both of the characters made a lot of sense and were pretty good. And generally, I think he's good in that role. It's the role he's obviously been wanting to do for years.
I
I think
wish
a lot of
I wish he had a solo movie. I would have liked to see him in the solo movie. I could
yeah, no, definitely.
opinion of him.
Yeah, like, and so, like, to me, it's like, okay, like, obviously he's been wanting to do these movies for, like, ever, and I think a lot of the fans got upset when he's just like, ah, man, I don't know if I even want to do these. I don't know if it's worth to be Batman or whatever. And it's like, dude, you get to be Batman. Like, take the money, make a badass movie, and,
Right.
dude, because that's sort of where your career is arcing to, right? So it's like, all right, we have this different Joker movie, we have this different Batman movie, and it's like, I get it. Batman's the most popular DC character, right? Batman might be the most popular comic book character, right?
I'd agree. I think he is. You
So
don't make
my
you don't make the amount you don't make the amount of you don't have the amount of actors playing Batman. You don't have the amount of actors playing Joker. I mean,
right,
Joker was the first character ever to get 2 Oscars by 2 different actors. So
right.
I'm willing to say, yeah, Batman and Joker are probably the 2 most popular comic book characters. Spider-Man probably being a close third.
Yeah, sure. So it's like, okay, if your thing is, because here's what would be cool, right? Like, yeah, we're gonna actually do some alternate Elseworlds kind of almost Dark Horse type of shit with some of the DC properties, and like that's why we're giving you this solo Joker movie, and this is why we're giving you this unrelated solo Batman movie, because Batman's gonna be the testing ground for that idea of like, yeah, there's gonna be some alternate universes, and we'll do different stories and shit with it. So if we're gonna do that, fine, that's cool. Like, I love Crisis on Infinite Earths, so like, fucking have a black Batman, have do different Batmans, do the Russian Batman, do the Batman who laughs, do the heavy metal Batman.
Yeah.
Dope. Do it.
Do Superman Red Sun. Do like if you're gonna do it, branch out. But make sure that if you're going the path of Crisis on Infinite Earths, that you have enough to really try to pull this off, and then afterwards get ready to downsize like crazy. Which I don't know if DC should be aiming for. Crisis
I
on
don't know. I mean, I think they're just trying to do a different, like, if you take them at their face value, it's like, we're just trying to do a different thing because there's this other company who's been kind of knocking it out of the box and killing it lately, and we don't necessarily want to follow that path. So it's like, okay, that'd be cool, but, also there's this feeling from, like an audience point that, like, you guys kind of just don't know what you want to do with these characters. Like, you want to make the movies and make the money.
Thank you. Yeah.
But you don't know what your plan is. You don't really have a plan. You're just kind of like, well, why don't you just let's throw out a good movie and then we'll see where we're at. Like, like I would love to see a kind of DC cinematic movie universe that has some continuity. Like, I know people were just like, oh, well, forget crossing over characters, just make a good movie, right? And it's like, I was actually really super excited at the end of Shazam when, like, you see the the new Superman suit. Like, you don't get to see the face, but you get to see Superman walk up, and it's just like, it's dope that there is a universe, like a DC universe, where Shazam gets to be a hero and not a side character, and then also, like, Superman shows him, it's like, hey man, you're cool, let's go be super buds and kick butt.
And I think that's another thing that I really want to hit. That is a good point, because so much of this pandering and crap that sometimes happens is that you're sitting there and it's like, guys, we know about Crisis on Infinite Earths, but Crisis on Infinite Earths was 30 years of building in comics. They kept throwing stuff in there, and then after a while, the writers were just like, we got to downsize, and we got to downsize like crazy, and we need something that's going to make sense. And they cut hard. They really like this is. I hate to be that guy that's like that. If Crisis on Infinite Earths happened about 10 years later, it'd be one of the most talked about events that would have happened, because that's how people relate to like Infinity Gauntlet, right? Because Infinity Gauntlet was like was such a huge thing and such a huge risk.
Yeah.
So what I'm assuming though is that for some odd reason, because they already did Crisis on Infinite Earths in the TV shows.
Sure.
How long did it take to build that up? That still took 8 years to really build up to get to that point. A lot of people liked what they did.
Yeah, like to me,
wanted it to be where they ended shows altogether, where DC was like, great, we're ending shows. This is their series finale.
Yeah, like to me, like that's the dope thing as a comic book character. Is like you want to see the world, or sorry, the universe be represented, right? You like a universe where you realize that Batman and Superman live in the same world, and they go and they talk. They go, they go talk to John Constantine and shit like that or whatever, right? Because it makes sense. Why wouldn't all these heroes be helping each other and covering each other? And that's what you get a lot in the DC, because there's Justice League, the Justice League Dark, the Justice Society, the Green Lantern Corps, like there's all these different guys who kind of work together, right? To me, it's like this. If you want to do it where your justification is like, we're just going to do some alternate versions of the stories, cool, right? Like, I want to see more of that, though, and I don't want to just see, like, well, this is a Batman reboot where we're going to have a new Catwoman, a new Joker, a new origin story for Batman. Like, if you're going to do it in a way where it's just like, okay, yeah, like, you're giving me something actually fresh instead of just repainting the characters so you can put another Batman movie out and make some money.
So we haven't even touched the trailer. I'm not going to give my opinion on it because I think it's pretty well known where my opinions kind of stand on it. But give me your thoughts on the trailer so we can hop into this movie.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I feel like we're getting a lot of modern Batman vibes as far as the movie goes. You get a little Nolan, you get a little kind of the Snyder. You get those kind of feels of just kind of like a more, I don't even want to say like gritty or grounded, because that's not right, but just that kind of almost like a more rugged storytelling of kind of Batman and his characters and, that origin. Like, I'm into it. Like, you have this guy who sat, did three or four movies being a vampire. So, who would you make Batman? Sure, that guy. So I'm fine with that part. It looks good. I like that scene where he just beats the crap out of the guy and says he's vengeance. Like, all right, yeah, that's pretty Batman-y to me.
That scene cracks me up because somebody put a meme there like Batman hits the thug. It like shows the picture of the black guy and he's like all smiling. He's like, like that. And then it says Batman continues hitting the thug.
Yeah.
It's like just going at it. I mean, he landed a good 9 blows in the trailer. I loved it.
Dude, it's like an MMA fight. It's like, dude, he's down. He's all right. He's already knocked out.
Yeah, but he's not out.
I would love to see like a real sort of I'm the vengeance, I'm the night. Oh yeah, Batman. That Batman.
Sure.
I love Keaton's Batman, but he's like a crazy murderer. And then, it's like you have kind of the, you have the Nolan Batman, which, I do like, but like he has stuff going on. He has issues, he's a little sad. Like, I want to see a Batman who's totally into the sort of like I'm Batman type of thing,
Right. I want somebody to celebrate themselves as Batman and
right.
all of your flaws, buddy.
I want a Batman that's like Kevin Conroy's Batman, where it's like, I'm never gonna stop being Batman.
Right.
I'm Batman.
Exactly. All right. So thanks for your thoughts. This movie is, I would probably put it in at least top 5 of maybe best indies. At least when it came out, it was definitely out there. It's also from, I will tell you right now, one of the most talented directors and also one of the most frustrating directors I've ever watched. Because as great this guy, if he would have signed with like Warner Brothers, for example, you're probably looking at him getting a superhero movie, like or at least a major sci-fi franchise.
Yeah.
Instead, we got this, and then we got a movie that I absolutely hate, and I consider the worst movie of all time. And then we got another movie that had Cameron Diaz in it and James Marsden of all people, which was okay. It was just okay.
Yeah, you press this button, you get $1 million, but someone dies. Yeah.
Yeah, that movie. But it was fine. It doesn't hold up, but it was fine. We are taking this back all the way to October 26th of 2001 with the cult classic, and now what I would consider legendary movie, Donnie Darko.
That's right, Donnie Darko. We're back on the Swayze train.
That's right. As you guys know, Lund and I have this joke where the only movies that we tend to do is Keanu Reeves movies and Patrick Swayze movies. And so when we were coming up for an idea to do this movie, I know Roadhouse was something that we wanted to cover, but he was like, let's change it up. Let's do something a little bit weird. I was like, okay, because I like having weird conversations. Like weird conversations that's me. That's what I'm all about. And he was like, let's do Donnie Darko, and I was like, yeah, okay, because it's not that Jay and I couldn't have this conversation. It's just that Jay isn't going to commit to the weird conversation, and Lund will commit to this weird conversation, which may or may not make this episode good. I don't care. It's his final episode, so we're going to do the best that we can. Original release date, October 26th of 2001. It technically shares opening weekend with K-Pax, which is all right. That's pretty solid. But this movie only grossed $7.5 million. It didn't even crack the top 10 that weekend. So you don't actually find it. You have to really dig your way through.
Oh yeah.
That being said, over the years, this movie had a director's cut, which I definitely want to touch on because it's kind of like Lord of the Rings expanded edition. It's right. Or Kingdom of Heaven expanded edition. It's like, okay, you watch it and you already think it's, okay, this is pretty good. Then you watch the director's cut and it's like, oh, you're giving me more than I could have possibly ever asked for this.
Yeah, you just added some of the scenes back in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, well, this is infinitely more interesting. This movie is incredibly well casted. It's directed by Richard Kelly, which when I tell you he's directed one of the worst movies of all time, the reason why it's one of the worst movies of all time, I'm talking about the movie Southland Tale. Okay? I'm going to tell you the reason why this movie is so bad. It's because it's so pretentious in every single idea that it has. It's like the end of the world is coming. Okay, great. I'm going to cast a whole bunch of like up and coming actors that you're gonna like, and it's like, okay, it's like who? They're like Dwayne Johnson. All right, great. Sean William Scott. Cool. Sarah Michelle Gellar. All right. Mandy Moore. Okay. Justin Timberlake. What? And then they're like, oh no, we're not done. They're like, we're gonna also cast Eileen. We're gonna cast John Mayer. Okay, we're gonna cast Kevin Smith. In this, and it's like, okay, this sounds pretty awesome. At one point in this fucking movie, you get a Jeep fucking another Jeep. I'm going to repeat. Excuse me. It's a Humvee. I was wrong. It's a Humvee.
Well, Humvees are Jeeps, but yes.
No. The tailpipe turns into a penis. The Jeep's tailpipe turns into a vagina, and you literally, and this is an ad. This is an ad. It was like, it's so out there but you can't appreciate it. You can't, because after a while you're just like, God, please end, just stop. And yeah, I remember watching. I remember watching like somebody like talk about it. They go, "There's been worse quality movies. I would still watch those over this because at least this movie, it just like it like shoves it in your face how bad this movie is."
Yeah.
But Donnie Darko is not like that. Luckily, Donnie Darko stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Jenna Malone, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Drew Barrymore, Patrick Swayze, Noah Weil from ER fame, DeVay Chase, who would kind of have a little solid career, and just kind of brings in a whole bunch of good people. Seth Rogen is in this. Ashley Tisdale's in this.
Yeah.
There's an uncredited version of the 1988 presidential candidate Michael Dukakis, who ironically in July of 1988, when was far ahead in the polls against George Bush, and
Yeah.
still wound up losing. So a little bit weird, and especially since we're in that season now. And I don't know, this movie has like three parts to it that's pretty remarkable,
Yeah.
and it's hard to kind of get like super into all the details of the story without understanding some of the themes. And one of the biggest themes is time travel. The idea
Yes.
of how time travel, and in theory, how it can kind of work, and how if you expand your mind just enough, you can kind of see where everything kind of ticks in. The other one is definitely on upper middle class conservatism, and how that attitude kind of ruined a lot of things for a lot of people. Um, and also teenage angst. There's
Yes.
a lot of teenage pent up rage in this movie that you kind of, and it tries. The funny thing is that it really tries justifying itself a lot in this movie,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But we're gonna get into this. Lund, before we get into this, why did you pick this movie?
Okay, I mean, really, it's one of my favorite movies. I've seen it a ton of times, and like, look, I've been on the show, a number of times, and usually what I go for is either
I
kind of
think
either more action-y based movies or more like kind of like dark, cerebral kind of, stories. And I feel like this movie fits kind of that bill. Like, I've watched it a bunch of times. I find it interesting. I think you hit the three abstracts of kind of like what forms this movie really well. The movie itself isn't so much about the plot. So unlike some of the more simple movies that we go through and kind of just describe the story beats and the plot, there's so much more kind of going on here. So that's why I find it interesting. I think it's just it would be a great movie to talk about.
right, and
Also, it has Patrick Swayze in it.
right. And I want to touch on somebody else who critiqued this movie. Doug from Nostalgia Critic hit on this movie, and what he was saying was basically like there's a lot of plot holes in this, and he goes and it just feels a little pretentious that what this movie message is. And I don't disagree, but at the same time, I feel like it's because he's not diving deeper into the movie than he should have. You know what?
Sure.
It's like he's watching it for the sake of it being a movie, and when you watch it for
Right.
the sake of it being a movie, you're going to have you're going to win a lot of arguments on that. But
Sure.
it's when you decide to kind of break further into that things kind of change itself up.
Yeah, like, look, for sure, the movie has plot holes. The movie has stuff that doesn't make sense, right? I could argue that the movie's not really about that. Maybe that's a pretentious way of talking about it. For me, it's like this, right? You can say the movie's pretentious, right? But Donnie himself isn't a pretentious character, right? He is a smart character right? Like he is physically smart but troubled, right? And the movie goes out of your way to tell you that. And essentially, he's just like this kid who's kind of just spinning his wheels in the situation. Like, he doesn't really understand what's going on. In fact, he's motivated by this force that he doesn't really understand at all, right? So it's like, I mean, to feel that it's like, don't get me wrong. I guess if you don't like the movie, you don't like the movie, and that's fine, right? I mean, I think the movie says some stuff. I like what the movie tries to say. I think the movie transcends just the idea of one narrative, like one narrow viewpoint. I think it transcends the idea that, like, I don't perfectly identify with this character, so I don't get the movie, right? Like, I think there's some good parts. I think it says some stuff. I think there's some stuff that also doesn't land. I think there's some. The movie builds to some metaphors that don't really pay off at times, but I don't think that really hurts the movie. You know, like at the end of the day, the movie's about this kid who either makes the choice to kind of keep going and deal with the consequences they're going, or kind of letting his wheels actually spin out and sort of paying the price so that his loved ones can move on with their lives, you know, unburdened by him. And also there's a chance that none of that really happened and either this is just a dream
Sure.
or a hallucination, and it doesn't matter anyways. So
Right. And I hate that idea if that was the case.
sure. I don't necessarily agree with it.
So this movie kicks off on October 2nd, 1988, in the small town of Middlesex, Virginia. A troubled teenager, Donnie Darko, or Donald J. Darko,
Yes.
is led by a mysterious voice as he sleepwalks out of his home. But a couple of things. This opening shot really shows like this really cute little small town in the burbs. And here's the thing. When you live in the burbs, when you live in actual suburbia, there is a really clear difference between the mindset of people in suburbia versus the mindset of people in a major city. And they kind of hit that on the movie, like Shaun of the Dead is a good, or not Shaun, Hot Fuzz is a good example.
Yeah.
Because in Hot Fuzz, it's like, okay, well, we kind of want to make a perfect little town just the way that it is. And you're from the big city. Like, you know, what do you know?
Right.
I mean, we don't really have these problems here. I mean, look at some of the imagery that they do in the first case. The dad's like watering the lawn. The little girl's bouncing up and down on the trampoline.
Yeah.
The mom's kind of smiling. It's kind of like this picture perfect little town.
Yeah.
Over to Donnie, and Donnie is in the middle of basically a mountain highway, or not really a mountain highway, but a hill road. You know, just kind of laying himself out there.
Yeah.
He's waking up by this voice that you know later in the day forces him to kind of sleepwalk out of his home. And when he sleepwalks outside of his home, he's met by this figure that's in this like really grotesque rabbit costume. And for imagery's sake, the rabbit costume really hits because it does not look friendly at all. Like you're like, that is terrifying. But all it's saying is that the world will end in 28 days. Oh, he introduces himself as Frank, by the way. That the world will end in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Donnie wakes up the next morning on a local golf course and returns home to find a jet engine. And I mean, like, first of all, I almost feel like it's almost too big to be a jet engine, but then I like think about a jet engine and I'm like, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense.
It's like a commercial airliner jet engine.
Right. And I mean, this jet engine apparently crashed through the roof of his house, through his bedroom, and crashed through the living room. Nobody was hurt, but it was so surreal and weird. His older sister tells him that the FAA investigators do not know what the origin of this is.
Yeah.
So over the next several days, though, Donnie, you can already tell, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is kind of a troubled guy. And I will say that he's definitely troubled. Like I remember at first I was like, no, he's not that bad. But then like watching it this recent time was like, okay, he's a lot worse than I'm underselling how troubled the guy actually is.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, and this is, I remember, I don't know if this is like the first big movie he's in, but I remember this being like the first movie, like seeing Jake and Maggie Gyllenhaal in, right? And they would both go on and do a bunch of other stuff, right?
Sure, yeah,
Um, if you take the movie at the face value of it, he's either being led by invisible forces, imaginary friends, and whatnot, or he's imagining all this shit.
right.
So he's definitely at least, I mean, textbook has
Krennic, right?
mental health issues, right?
Right,
And they make the point of saying that while he's super intelligent, like he's like really intelligent, that he has this kind of emotional disconnect and this sort of like a mental disconnect with the world around him, right?
right.
And
And
that's actually that's pointed by his sort of you know like he is what's the good word to say? He is so like while his older sister is kind of like this rebel, right? Around this time, she's like a kind of like a
first of all, she's
feminist.
like an incredibly smart rebel, to be
Yeah,
fair.
right,
And both of the kids are actually really smart, and you can
yeah,
really tell that they are.
right. But while she's this rebel who wants to kind of like join the world and like agitate for I don't know, like change, via kind of the success of her like upper middle class white family. Donnie, you can tell he doesn't feel like he has a place really in the world at all. Seems like he feels kind of disaffected. He's not really buying into the system or whatever,
Right,
and it chafes almost, it like chafes everybody almost except for like his family, you know.
right. No, solid point.
Yeah,
He gets sent to the psychiatrist, Dr. Thurman, and I'll be honest, like, normally when movies do a therapist scene, the therapist always seems like half interested. Like, it's almost like, okay, something about Mary showed this like perfectly. But something about Mary is like you see Ted and he's kind of talking in his chair. Richard Jenkins is like out of the room because because of like whatever, right? And so because Richard Jenkins is kind of whatever with this, he's like he's kind of out of this room and he's like half interested. This therapist is invested into
yes,
Donnie's thing, and I applaud her to an extent because it's almost like you don't. It's like you're not solving the problem. All you're doing is talking overall about the feeling.
sure. I mean, definitely she exists as sort of like this plot point too, because she's invested, right? It's like you
Right.
say. Usually, when you see like a therapist character like this, they're just like, "Why won't you be normal? Why let me fix you, and then go out and go do your shit." She seems actually invested, right? So really, their scenes ends up being kind of like this sort of plot device where um, Donnie gets to sort of verbalize this sort of what's happening to him, this like inner struggle, right? Like the movie uses a lot of show don't tell, right? So we'll see something and later it's contextualized to the conversation he has with his therapist, either under hypnosis, which they introduced really early in like one of the first sessions. She's like, I think we can only get to the bottom of your problems via hypnosis, right? So she'll put him in a suggestive state, and then it kind of will like describe kind of what the former story beat or the next one is going to be, right?
Sure.
Like, really quickly in the movie, right? Um, well, I think I'm gonna get ahead of myself. So, pretty much, she's engaged, and so after kind of like this scene where we find that Johnny's not dead, and he talks to Frank, and he tells him the world's gonna end. He kind of goes back to school, and the school doesn't start off shut down because of the water main, but so he goes to class, and his teacher's Drew Barrymore, and she's very much kind of like a Dead Poet Society. I
Yeah.
care about these kids. I need to educate these kids, and I'm like, all right, cool, And she is what?
And she may be,
Reading,
she actually may be my That Chick Award in this movie because there's a lot of little stuff because she's basically trying to find a way to connect to the kids. Now, her acting isn't the greatest in this. I'll be fair on that. But one of the things she kind of talks about is she talks about Graham Greene,
the Destructors.
the Destructors, right? It's a short story, it's only like 13 pages long. And the whole point of it is like these kids in England decide to just one day go and destroy this guy's house, but it isn't out of hatred or anything. It isn't out of hatred. It isn't out of anything. It's basically only for the context that the story is basically ironic. It's showing that destruction is a form of creation in the sense for you to build something anew, you have to destroy something old, right? That's the metaphor that's basically trying to decipher here. Which interesting, and the theme does kind of stick a little bit to this movie a little bit. Although, again, one of the problems I have is when filmmakers don't fully commit to the idea. And I think it would have cleared up a lot of questions when that happened.
Right. Like the real big point is later because Donnie's mode usually is, and somehow he does this in a way using almost superhero abilities because he does things that shouldn't be physically possible for like a teenage boy, right?
Sure.
So the whole point of that really ends up being kind of like later. A similar thing happens at the school. Like Donnie will hear about something or get an idea, and then he'll sort of act it out.
A little bit, yeah.
Everyone else, and that's sort of like how the plot moves. Now, I think with her character, because I remember in the director's cut, there's a bit where they're talking, or I can't remember if they're watching the cartoon version of it, or they're reading the story of what Watership Down with the Rabbit story. So,
right,
like,
and Watership Down. Okay, first and foremost, Watership Down. It colorizes itself like a kids movie. Don't ever watch it if you're a kid. Please don't ever.
Don't watch that movie. Also, don't watch Grave of the Fireflies. Anyways, so like her character arc seems to be this idea of like, trying to kind of give humanity to her students via shaking them out of their kind of like whitewashed suburban life by confronting them with kind of like these stories about acts of destruction, right?
Sure.
Sort of like water, like the Destructors about destroying to create, Watership Down sort of like the kind of the brutality of nature. You know what I mean? Like the dogs are
nature, right? Like nature will find a way to take its course, and whether you want whether you want to cover your eyes to it or accept it full on is one or the other. That I remember that being a big theme with Watership Down. That's like, nature is cruel, but it's okay because it's still nature.
Right. It's cruel but beautiful, and I think maybe that's
okay.
I think that's why it doesn't feel like she kind of commits, at least, or in the theatrical version, because that's something that kind of gets cut.
Right.
But yeah, go ahead.
So in the class afterwards, we get Gretchen Ross that comes walking in. Jenna Malone comes walking in, and her character. The one thing is that the character you try to feel a little bit of sympathy for her. She's kind of a new girl, trying to figure out whatever. I really like what Drew Barrymore did, although it totally wouldn't fly in today's society where she's like, where should I sit? She goes, sit to the boy that you think is the cutest. And I'm like, you know what, Richard Kelly, good for you for living out your high school fantasy there.
Right.
And like Gretchen's story is basically she came in from another town. Of course, she's a new girl. and her dad had basically attempted to kill her mom, and the mom is in bad shape at least. Because you do find out that she later dies in the film. And so she's just kind of living out here with, I guess, extended family. She's under a new identity to escape her violent stepfather because the stepfather was never found, which, you know, I thought might have played a little bit more into this movie, but it never did.
And yeah, I mean, it kind of gets brought back up towards the end.
A little bit, sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Thurman, so it goes back to a therapy session, and Dr. Thurman hypnotizes Donnie at his next therapy session. But all it basically does is ends up discussing his sexual fantasies involving Christina Applegate, and he straight up like starts unzipping his pants while all this until she basically wakes him up. But the whole reason why, and then afterwards they like have this conversation while shooting bottles while his friends are basically discussing like the sexual components of Smurfs.
Right.
And it's like Smurfette was solely there she basically gangbangs everybody, and like Donnie comes like with this whole thing. He does a whole nerd bit, which is what I love. He's like, first of all, Smurfs don't even have penises. So, and then
Smurfs are asexual, and then Gargamel created
them, you know,
to corrupt the Smurfs. Yeah.
To corrupt the Smurfs, right? And so, you know, it's kind of going through all that, and it's funny. But it kind of hits another theme into this, which is teenage angst and teenage sexual frustration in this case, which is all they're really talking about in this is basically they have so much pent up rage and how it's bad to have premarital sex, you know, how it's bad to even like really discuss it, because this is 1988 USA. This isn't, you know, 10 years later where the rules started to kind of loosen up a little bit, but it was like it was almost like the town was leaded down this way to become that footloose town, you know, in Oklahoma. But it hadn't fully. It was like the parents are committed, but the kids are kind of giving a little bit of pushback on it. And it's like talking about is like the teenage angst and teenage sexual frustration, but it really hits with this movie because you're curious if because there's so much angst and frustration that it forces their minds to kind of create and perceive different things with this. At least that's a theme that I thought.
I agree.
Go ahead.
No, I agree 100%. Like, yeah, there's this. I think that's one of those things that kind of make the movie work, right? Because one of the big, you know, there's like, I think with the component of Donnie, right? A lot of, you know, he's like a dark hero. He's a flawed hero. That's the kind of the idea, right? And a lot of it has to do with sort of like the frustration of the expectations put onto them. Like later on, I know I keep kind of jumping ahead. You know, we have, you know, a character shows up who kind of represents almost like a ideal of like puritanical kind of moral values interweaving with kind of like new age kind of psychotherapy type of stuff, and that represents kind of that idea of that oppression, right? Like you have these kids having these adults telling them how they should think or feel about things, and really they have no choice but to go with it. So they're, you know, the natural response is kind of for them to push back, right? Because we see that from Donnie. Well, again, I'm getting out of myself. But yeah, I think when it comes to Donnie, right? Like, look, I remember being a teenager, right? That type of frustration was very real.
Yeah.
If you're saying it's real for you too, so like to me, it's like that kind of makes the character more genuine, right? Like you can understand.
Sure. And later on that evening, Donnie goes from a vision to basically pick up an axe and damage and destroy the main line, right, at the school, which causes the school to shut down at least for that day, maybe even a little bit longer. And he puts the axe into the mascot on the top of the head. Then it cuts to the gym teacher, Kitty Farmer, which as much as I hate her, and she is my that fool in this movie. The thing with Kitty Farmer is that it again kind of talks about not coming to fruition, like basically that idea where that classism kind of takes into place, and she's a perfect example of like this entire idea. I feel like conservatives now would relate to Kitty so much because
Oh,
because she plays that fiddle so well, right?
she's
And
like, yeah, her whole bit is she's like a super Karen, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's really what she is, right? And she attributes like these acts of vandalism to the influence of that short story, The Destructors, right? Which, okay,
I,
maybe she kind of has a point there, because it may have really been that the Destructors kind of created this idea in the head of Donnie for Donnie to go out and go out. And Donnie knows he's in trouble, but nobody's really taking seriousness with it. So they reach out to a local motivational speaker who is played by the Everly Handsome, absolutely dashing, and may he rest in peace, Patrick Swayze playing Jim Cunningham.
Jim
And like
Cunningham.
Jim Cunningham's like whole thing is basically like how you should confront fear and embrace love. It's like this whole thing. It's like this huge motivational speaker thing that they
Yeah.
try to do up. And they're basically forcing these kids into these lessons now, right? They're like, well, for us to kind of get through this, we think this is the best way to attribute it. But the problem is, the problem with the idea is that it really like glosses over every single teenage problem that was out there. Sure, destruction of property, that's a level of fear, right? To embrace a sibling for being accepted into college, that's a symbol of love, and doing all this. But as you come later to find out, as you come to find out, like you find out some information towards him, but Donnie like kind of basically confronts him pretty quickly at like this like little town hall thing, and this happens later in the movie. So let me be fair,
Yeah.
but
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying. He pushes back against the idea immediately, right? Because the idea of this philosophy, it's one, it's like you said, it doesn't weigh into a whole bunch of factors, right? It glosses over a bunch of stuff,
right.
but
It's
also, right, it's dismissive and it's arbitrary, right? As the movie, because the thing is, it's just like, he talks about how life really works, and if you want to solve your problems, you should make a plan and a direct action for that problem instead of just embracing fear and love. You know, as the movie goes on to say, acts of destruction can be acts of love. Acts of complacency or accepting the status quo aren't positive inherently, right?
right.
So, like, and again, I think this is why what makes Donnie a good character. Like, sure, he pushes against the system, he agitates for it, but also there's this system in place that's not really helping him solve his problems. In
Right.
fact, it's not really helping anyone solve their problems. It's just perpetuating the same thing. The
Right.
thing,
Exactly.
yeah, that's just convenient for the parents and the teachers and whatnot.
Right.
Another bit of thing about Jim is that Jim is actually one of the guys that confronts him after he wakes up on the golf course. So, like, there's definitely, like, if you watch the movie, there is a sort of interweaving narrative where it's just like, yeah, there's going to be like a reckoning between these two characters.
Sure. Sure. Um, it's like he leads like this, like Donnie rebels against this idea, which leads to friction between Kitty and his mom, which again kind of plays a part into this movie. Also,
Yeah.
one of the good things about this movie is that, as weird as it is, at least the scenes lead up to the points of where some of the actions kind of make sense. Kind
Yeah,
of.
I mean, look, I think don't get me wrong. Is there holes? Yes. I think what's really great is everything kind of interconnects in this way. Like if you watch the movie and you rewatch the movie, they're like when you think about what scenes follow what and like how the characters interact and when characters first interact with other characters, like the narrative has this sort of like social, the narrative has this sort of like circular,
Right.
It's
It
logical or however you call it.
Sure. And so Donnie goes and he reaches out to the science teacher, who's played by Noah Wild, Professor Kenneth Monatoff. And Monatoff's whole thing, and it's kind of interesting because they kind of go and they kind of have this little discussion, and you can't really fault Monatoff. Monatoff still has a bit of a narrow point of view, but he gives him a book because first of all, Donnie gets instructions to research time travel from Frank. Okay, so in that process, Monatoff gives him a book on the philosophy of time travel, who's written by Roberta Sparrow, a former science teacher at school, who's basically like this old senile old woman living outside of town. Now here's the thing.
Grandma Death.
Grandma Death. Here's a hilarious thing about her. She is constantly out in like the middle of the road, like the middle of the road, which is already weird enough, but she goes out into like the middle of the road and checks her mailbox for something, and then stands back out in the middle of the road, and then like goes back in. I don't recall in the director's cut if she ever says anything to him, but
she does.
Okay, so right, yeah, the whisper, right? No, I remember now. Sorry, they're watching the game. I'm cracking up.
Nice.
So here, why don't you keep talking? I'm going to close my door real quick.
Okay, cool. What were we talking about?
Roberta Sparrow.
So she stands in the middle of the road and she's like looking for something, right? So what's interesting about the character is that so I guess she was like this nun that followed, it was like she was a super religious nun. She has this crazy experience. She quits being a nun. She becomes a scientist, then she becomes a teacher, right? And there's this intersecting kind of idea of like morality, God, time travel, and all these things, right? So when not Noah, that's his real name. When his science teacher tells him about Miss Sparrow, he's like Grandma Death. So he goes and he gives him the book and he starts reading it, right?
Right.
And that's when he gets the chance to start learning about time travel.
Right. Which the time travel portion of the story is definitely when this movie starts going definitely a little bit weird. Now, in the theatrical version of this movie, it's not fully explained. So they're kind of left to suspend a little bit of belief into this, into why this is even happening in the first place. Right. In the director's cut, there's a little bit more clear until chapter 2, because chapter 2 just kind of throws everything out of the book, which annoys me a little bit. But basically, in the director's cut, you get to see chapter 6, which literally talks about something that's called the tangent universe, which is if a tangent universe occurs, it will be highly unstable, sustaining life for no longer than several weeks. Eventually, it will collapse upon itself, forming a black hole within the primary universe capable of destroying all existence. So this all starts to culminate a little bit. When Donnie notices late one evening when they're watching a football game, Donnie notices a yellow column, or not a bubbly column, emerging from the chest of people around him that show Donnie where the person will basically move. And then a bubble appears on his chest, and he decides to follow to his parents' closet, where he finds and takes a gun. Now, I briefly want to talk about what this basically could mean, because there's a lot of different aspects of it, but there was a theory that was proposed by physicist David Dutch. Yeah, David Dutch and Michael Lockwood. And they kind of combine this together that says, well, this isn't really bad science or anything. It's not even weird. They basically called it a world line. And what it basically is that your life forms are kind of four-dimensional worm in space-time. The tip of the worm's tail corresponds to the event of your birth, and the front of his head to the event of your death. An object seen at any one instance is a three-dimensional cross-section of this long, thin, integrated, curved worm. The line along which the worm lies is called the object's world line. So the theory is that if the tangent universe has become unstable, then according to Grandma Death's book, that the person who can see it is then known as the living something, right? He's basically the Messiah, right? And he's basically able to transcend this idea that, okay, maybe that's a little weird and a little bit fluky, but there is some really unique ideas with it, because it basically also talks about if this is the tangent universe, then you have to assume that the real universe is a parallel universe, right?
Right.
So the movie is now talking about time travel, or at least a theory of time travel between parallel universes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I always saw it as sort of like a because it's time travel, but it's like the whole time and space thing and gravity thing, right? Like the thing that's unique about Donnie at this point, if he is truly seeing these things and not just hallucinating, is that every other thing sees how everything else in the world operates right within a certain line, right? But
Sure.
they can't see how they interact or how they operate, right? To me, it almost seemed like Donnie can see other living creatures' entangled states, right? Because that's sort of like quantum entanglement's this idea that the physical space that we physically perceive doesn't really exist, right?
Right.
But there's based on your connection to an object, you're technically closer to that object than you physically can actually measure, right?
Sure.
And that
And
sort of makes sense in the sort of plot where like characters interact with each other at these certain right times that kind of make the story happen and then kind of circle back around.
So then this bubble, like it kind of talks a little bit. Again, the discussion then goes to the idea of free will, right?
Right.
If you have a predetermined destiny, like if I had a bubble going right now and it was facing this direction, it may tell me, or earlier when I said I was going to close the door, my bubble then turned around and led me to the door and then led me back to here, right?
Right.
And it kind of gives the idea of this idea of that we don't really have a necessarily form of free will that we think it is.
Right.
It's kind of calling itself out on that. However, the movie itself even provides a small answer to that, which is you still have a choice. Your predetermined destination doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to follow that destination. It's this theory. It's this, again, a great theory that when it comes to the idea of how time travel, free will, predetermined destination kind of comes into it. It's like at that point, if you were to know your future, right? If you were to know your future and you were to know how exactly you were to live, but you decided to change the way that you perceive that future, meaning you decided to make a choice against that future, your future is no longer considered that future. It would simply draw a parallel to that future to create this infinite amount of futures. And the best way I could kind of describe that in terms of like quantum physics wise is Hugh Everett, a famous physicist who was basically came up with a general concept of parallel universes when he was discussing wave function collapse and quantum mechanics, where he's talked about how that would work in basically parallel universes. The idea is that in quantum physics, a particle is observed in a superposition of states. So what that basically means...
Oh, we're talking about Heisenberg. Okay, here
that's right. That a particle, that all of our cells are in a superposition of states until it is observed. So that means it could be
Donnie Darko.
Sure, yeah. So it could be one of a number of things. So, for example, a photon, the particle that gives light, right? The particle that is known as the light particle, right? Is both a particle and a wave until it is observed. When it is observed, it makes up its mind. Right, exactly. It's supposed to collapse into a definite state. So basically, when it's observed, it makes up its mind on what it is at that point, and it goes from an indefinite state and collapses into a definite state. However, Everett argues instead that that's not actually the case. That is only what we decide to perceive that photon to be in that universe, whereas instead we're literally witnessing a split from the Big Bang, that the wave does exist in the parallel form of this universe as well. So why the hell does this all connect itself to Donnie Darko? Well, you're going to find out very shortly.
Yeah. We kind of jumped. I mean, look, we explained the sort of the quantum physics part of the movie, so I guess we have to tie the bow in at the end once we go through the plot some more.
Sure.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to put some more light in here. The sun went down on me.
Go ahead. The sun went down on you. The sun is going down on me here. So back to the story a little bit, all right? So when they decide to bring in Jim Cunningham into this, Donnie, of course, rebels, leading to friction. And Frank asks Donnie, who in turn asks his science teacher for this book, which, again, yes, we all covered. And we covered where the bubble kind of pops out of its chest. Kitty then arranges for Cunningham to actually lead a school assembly. And in the school assembly, Donnie basically, insults him. And the whole thing about it is that it was already bad advice that Jim Cunningham was kind of giving, right? Because he was the sister of somebody was like, my sister is fat and I want her to lose weight. What should I do to help her out? And basically Cunningham was just like, well, she's fearful of her, whatever. And, just kind of bullshitting what he's basically, right?
If you accept her for who she is,
right?
Then she'll
blah, 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 right?
She'll solve her problem once she feels your love or whatever not.
Right. So instead, Donnie comes out and he's just like, look, I just think everything you're saying is fucking bullshit. If your sister wants to, you should tell her, go ahead and get up, don't eat that Twinkie, and, maybe go walk around the block every once in a while. Even we'll start losing weight, which is harsh, but not wrong.
it's factual. Like, they never even, the thing about the Jim Cunningham thing that makes no sense is, there are these sound bites made to feel like an 80s infomercial, which you literally see in the class, right? He never goes hey, you're right, being overweight's unhealthy. Have you ever addressed your concern with your sister? Have you ever talked to her about this? Because, what he's saying isn't inherently wrong. He's just skipping all the sort of functional steps, right?
Right. He's getting to an end product of something. It's like he's basically, again, looking over the entire problem in itself and just said, oh no, the reason why she's fat is because of this, and the reason why you have a competitor is because you're in fear of this. And it's like, yo, you don't even know if I confronted her about this. You don't know anything about me, man. So
take these simple, easy answers, buy my book, and do what your parents tell you to do.
Right. So it goes back to that idea of that conservatism, classism kind of thing, where it's like when teenagers, again, feel like they're not actually being listened to and they feel like that it's not being addressed, it's like, well, what are you doing for me here? Because if you're just trying to sell me a book, I don't have a job. I don't have a job. sell it to my parents if that's really what you want. Those are the people you're really going to want to sell to.
And look, and Kitty is so representative of that, right? Because she is wrapped
Oh,
up.
1,000%.
She's fallen.
1,000%.
She is fallen for a swinging baloney.
Right. So he later finds Cunningham's wallet and address, and Frank then suggests setting his house on fire. Which, by the way, the hallucinations between Donnie and Frank is getting worse, where Donnie literally pulls a knife in his dream and kind of starts stabbing this invisible wall that's there, and you see an eye get severely damaged, like really fucked up and damaged. So, as this talent show kind of happens where Donnie's little sister Samantha decides to participate, by the way, with Kitty's great advice, if you feel like throwing up, just swallow it. It's like, okay, like all right. And apparently they were going to go to like state finals and whatnot. I don't know what that's all about, but Donnie goes out with Gretchen to the movies to go watch The Evil Dead.
The Evil Dead. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. And as Gretchen falls asleep, Donnie goes and he's kind of having this discussion with Frank a little bit. And he goes, I'm going to show you something, right? And then basically Donnie essentially hallucinates the next bit of it. But in this process, he sets Jim Cunningham's house on fire. And you clearly see that setting the house on fire and arson happens. When police decide to start recovering like the pieces of it, they discover a horde of child pornography in there. Cunningham is arrested, and Cunningham is arrested, and Kitty, who is all up on this dude's dick, is like, we all know this is like false allegations. We all know this is not true. And basically goes up to Donnie's mom, Rose, and says, I really need you to help me cover for the girls' trip. I would love to be out there in Los Angeles helping out for the trip, but I need to make sure, I need to be there to help testify for Jim, because he's never done anything wrong. And at this point, there's a real sense there that again, it's why Kitty is such a good character, because it really again plays into like that bad parenting. She starts guilt tripping Rose for not basically doing more for her daughter to be there and chaperoning for her. Meanwhile, Kitty's the one that's going to go on trial for the child porn guy.
Right. She's gonna help out this guy that she has a lady boner for.
But Rose is the one that's the problem here.
Yeah.
So of course she leaves, and also the father, Eddie Darko, who is kind of
he's out of town on work.
Yeah, he's so useless in this movie. He really is. He's away on business. So Donnie and Elizabeth hold a Halloween costume party to celebrate Elizabeth's acceptance into Harvard, which she does get into. And at the party, Gretchen arrives distraught as her mother has gone missing. So I apologize. So her mother was attacked. Isn't dead, survived. The father is still out. The mom goes missing. She doesn't know what's kind of going on there.
No detail. We don't know if she was just in an abusive situation. She decided to go back to her abuser. We don't know if she was kidnapped.
Right. It's implied that Gretchen and Donnie have sex for the first time. And when Donnie realizes that Frank's basically prophesied into the world is only hours away, he takes Gretchen and his two friends to find Grandma Death or Sparrow, right?
Yeah.
Instead, they find the two high school bullies, which they weren't. I can't really. I mean, they were high school bullies, but it was like it felt almost out of character for them at this point, because it was like one of them pulls a knife, and not even a small knife, like a real switchblade.
Well, even in the the theatrical version, he kind of jumps Donnie in the bathroom because he takes The what he says is that I think you did it, Donnie, and I'm getting shit for it because I'm an asshole. Like because he's the school bully or whatever, they accuse him of cutting the water main earlier in the movie.
Right.
So his thought process, instead of being like, "Well, I know I didn't do that shit, so get off my back," is to go
Sure.
attack Donnie. So I guess this point has been established that he doesn't like Donnie, even though
Right.
realistically they should probably have more in common because they both kind of push against the kind of the school like conformity control thing. But I guess whereas Donnie is thoughtful and intelligent about it, he's kind of just an asshole. So I don't know.
No, I agree, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Um, Seth and Ricky are basically trying to rob like Sparrow's house. By the way, we can't really touch on it, but Drew Barrymore winds up getting fired from her job, which which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, kind of sucks, but kind of deserving.
A little bit.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
not to get in her biz, but I definitely think like her and the science teacher were like hooking up or something. There's some sort of like implication like we're the two cool teachers.
No, they weren't they?
Yeah, I think they were.
Like
I
at
don't
the end.
know. The last time I watched it, it was the like the last time I like what version of it I watched last night was the theatrical cut.
Oh,
I think maybe there was an expanded thing in the director's cut.
right.
Yeah.
So Donnie, Seth, and Ricky basically fight out in the road in front of Sparrow's house just as she returns home. Ricky and Seth flee when an oncoming car runs over Gretchen and kills her. And the driver is Elizabeth's boyfriend, Frank
Right.
Anderson, who is wearing that same fucking bunny costume that he keeps appearing. A second Frank can also be seen standing in the bushes in the same scene. Donnie shoots him in the eye,
Yeah.
his father's gun, and walks home carrying Gretchen's body. So this is where this movie kind of ends itself a little bit. And this is where I'm going to say I'm not 1,000% sure how all of these events kind of culminate because I'm not sure what exactly was the trigger. Was it necessarily the trigger that he's back in that original spot and that's where the wormhole was supposed to pop out or whatever? Donnie returns home as a vortex forms over his house. He takes one of his parents' cars, loads Gretchen's body. Mind you, walks home with Gretchen's body. Walks home with Gretchen's body. Like Gretchen is dead. Like she is dead, right?
Gretchen is dead to diggity dead.
Right, and drives to a nearby ridge that overlooks the town. There he watches as the plane that is carrying Rose and the dance troupe home from Los Angeles gets caught in the vortex wake, which rips off and catches one of its engines. Events of the previous 28 days decides to rewind, and Donnie wakes up in his bedroom, recognizes the date is October 2nd, and begins to laugh as the jet engine falls into his bedroom, crushing him to death. Around town, those whose lives Donnie would have touched wake up by having basically like troubled dreams, and everybody like wakes up having troubled dreams. Even Swayze, where the child pornography is still kind of going on, would come out at this point.
He never gets busted without Donnie, so.
Right, exactly. So Gretchen, when this timeline hadn't met Donnie yet, bikes by the Darko home the next morning and basically learns of his death. And she and Rose exchange glances as if they knew each other, but they can't remember from where in a moment of deja vu.
Which is weird because I don't think they ever meet each other or have a conversation.
But, yeah, and that's kind of, right. Which, yeah, I agree. She never meets any of her family, which is
I don't think it.
Awful. That's not how. I don't think that's how deja vu works.
Look, yeah, I don't think in either version. It must be some sort of collective. I knew Donnie, you know Donnie, connection, collective consciousness.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
Something, whatever.
So
yeah.
So that's
That's
Donnie Darko,
that's Donnie Darko.
and again to kind of touch a little bit on, again to kind of touch a little bit on the whole parallel universe time travel. The idea that it might have technically been science in a way is probably what makes this movie really, really interesting because again, everything is theorized. We don't know exactly if time travel is even possible because, again, you can't travel back. You know, the theory of you can't travel back in time because if you killed your own grandfather, how would you exist? Somebody has
Sure.
to be your grandfather, right? The grandfather
Yeah.
parallel is a great version. Um, so there's no such thing as traveling back in time, but maybe the theory of traveling forward in time. So the idea of Donnie basically traveling through parallel universes and time travel through parallel universes to make sure that his death culminates in the survival of basically Gretchen, his mom,
And his
uh,
sister.
and his sister to hit that point. That is what is really interesting more than anything about this.
Yeah, I mean, and this is to kind of go back to the thing we were talking about earlier. Like my theory or interpretation, or a theory I heard that it makes the most sense is that Donnie somehow, like the reason why there's a split timeline is because, or split dimension, is that somehow Donnie had did something. I mean, if you look at the movie and kind of like the way the circle works, is that him being called out in the first place, right? So the argument is that due to the nature of Donnie, he avoids his death inadvertently, right? Which creates the alternate universe, right?
Right.
Then, since he is kind of existing in this alternate universe and he's the only one aware of it, he can kind of see the world lines of other people, which allows him to kind of follow his world line back to the portal that allows him to go back in time where he should have died, closing the loop.
Sure. Which,
Yeah.
which then means is that the tangent universe has been destroyed and it goes back to being that permanent universe. I think is what the world was basically what the word was basically called. Um, yeah, it's on dark. Let's get some takeaways. Let's finish this thing up, and we'll so we can enjoy the evening together. I mean, just enjoy the evening. Who is getting your That Guy award?
You know, you kind of talk crap about him, but actually, I'm going to give it to Donnie's dad, right? And to kind of fast forward here a little bit, I'm going to give that girl to his mom. And here's why, right? And you don't get this as much in this version of the movie, right? But there are, like, in the director's version of the movie, there's these extended scenes where, like, Donnie has these interactions with his mom and dad, right? So the thing is, what I really appreciate about both of them is that they genuinely love their kids, right? Like they genuinely live their lives because they want to give more to their kids, right? Like there's always that sort of argument that like, yeah, you know, you do well in school, you make money, you move to the suburbs so you can raise your kids and they can be running or whatever, right? And a lot of times that's just kind of like in movies, you know, like hell, even movies where the dad is loving or whatever, kind of like Hook or like Liar Liar. There's this implications like this flawed character loves their kid, but also is so into their own shit that they neglect them, and that's totally not what you get here. Like at the end of the movie, his mom is genuinely hurt by the fact that her sons died. You
Yeah,
know, his father is genuinely hurt by the fact that the sons died. You know, like the whole movie, they support Donnie, and even though they have, you know, like a difficult conversation with a daughter about like political stuff or whatever, it's still based in this idea that um, like we, you know, is Michael? She even says, "Is Michael Dukakis going to help you support, you know, your children until you can make the world a better place or whatever?" Right.
right,
So it's very focused on this idea that there's this genuine like love and affection for their kids, and it's
right.
not just sort of like bullshit to kind of justify their actions, you know.
No, that's a really interesting point, especially because, you know, look, I know some families, you know, they try to avoid politics. At least with them, they were willing to at least openly discuss it at the dinner table, which is rather interesting. And then even later on, you have Maggie, who I can't remember her name right now, literally wrote "Vote Dukakis" on like you know, a little notepad board on the refrigerator. And like the dad didn't get like mad or anything. He just like kind of smirked at it and just kind of like walked away at it. So I think it's one of those things where you bring up a good point. The parents are definitely very supportive of their children, and it's actually really refreshing to see. You definitely don't feel the idea that they didn't care for Donnie's, you know, mental health. They didn't care for anything of that. They did everything. They took their kid at least seriously enough. They just didn't know how to help Donnie in this case, which is kind of fair.
Which speaks to sort of one of the messages of the movies, right? It's not like there's this kid who's damaged because his parents sucked and he was abused. He has legitimate problems, you know, and they're trying to help him with it, but that work is hard to do, right? So
that's that guy and that girl, right?
Yep.
All right, who's getting your That Fool award?
Ooh, boy. That Fool. I mean, you know what? It's going to Jim Cunningham on this one.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was hoping, because I really didn't want to be the guy that's like the kiddie porn guy.
Yeah, the kiddie porn guy. Yeah, kiddie porn's bad. Pedophilia is bad. You know. Also, you're full of shit. Like, you're like, not only is there this super bad criminal element that you're doing, but also like you're using that to cover for the fact that, you know, it's like you do this fucked up shit, and at the same time, it's not like you're giving the world anything good. You're just using kind of like bullshit, like self-help crap for like, you know, literally suburban moms and like, I don't know, like middle-class businessmen.
Sure.
You know, using that mentality to make money.
All right.
Yeah, you suck.
Cut that out.
Oh, cut that out. Oh, there's a scene very early on in the movie, and I think it's like the cringiest thing. There is a scene where Donnie and Samantha's the younger sister. What's Maggie's name in this?
Did you just call me a fuck ass or something like that?
Yeah. They swear at each other really bad. Oh, Elizabeth. Yeah, Elizabeth.
It is cringy. It is. You're not wrong. It's cringy. It's like, okay, like I get it. You guys are actually like brother and sister, but come on now, like.
Right. You're obviously related.
Right. The funny thing is that they don't even like dislike each other. They actually really like each other. Is what's hilarious. It's like okay, this is a really weird. It did fit their characters. I agree with you.
Yeah, we got to throw these barbs and jabs at each other because, you know.
Because the movie has to clearly show that we're brother and sister. Sure.
Yeah.
Does this movie age well?
Ooh, I'm going to say yes.
Tentatively.
Because, you know, again, there's some stuff where it's just like there's some elements of this movie I don't think would fly, like the whole go sit next to the boy you think is cute as shit.
Right. I still like that, but no, it wouldn't fly.
Like, I feel like there is some stuff that's like really 80s-ish, right? And some of it kind of is funny, some of it falls flat. But after watching the movie and the stories, you know, watching the story, it's like, yeah, I really like this movie, and I like, you know, a lot of it was trying to say about science and how we interact with each other and all that. So I think it does mostly.
Fair enough.
Look, I do think the problems aren't just like, oh, this movie's bad or it's stupid or it's just too dated. It's just there's some stuff in it that doesn't work. there's some stuff that really doesn't work when you take out scenes that are in like the full version of the movie. But it still holds. It's still like a great movie. After watching it, I felt like I still feel that feeling I felt the first time I watched it. So I'm gonna say yes.
Iconic scene.
Okay, so there's this awesome scene, and I wanted to bring it up earlier, but I kind of forgot about it because we're getting into all the science stuff. There's this scene after Donnie goes back to school for the first time, and it's kind of like parallel to the scene at the end of the movie where Donnie dies, and everyone that he's he affects like has wakes up and have nightmares or have that feeling that something bad's happened. There's like a scene where he goes back to school and Tears for Fears Head Over Hills play, and you literally see all of the students and the teachers like kind of going through this like long kind of down the hallways sort of continuous shot while the song plays.
Okay, sure.
Like it literally cuts as like the camera comes out of the school's like main doors. To me, it's just that's an awesome song. It was a dope scene where it shows like Kitty, shows all the students, it's shows all the teachers. I don't know, it's just like one of those good scenes. Just cinematography, I guess.
Very solid. My That Guy award is going to go to Jake Gyllenhaal. This wasn't Jake's first starring role. That would be October Sky 3 years earlier. But this was definitely a role to really kind of to not pigeonhole him into being like the goody two shoes like guy, which I can't tell you enough how much this movie probably helped Jake Gyllenhaal's career, because I think a lot of people afterwards were like, oh man, this dude can like act his ass off, and he really does act his ass off in this movie. Donnie is a weird character. I can't really say that he'd be somebody that I like root for, but at the same time, like when you're only observing Donnie's actions, you look at him as a hero. But if you ever like met him in person, you wouldn't really know how to feel about him. Like in some ways, you're like, dude, are you okay? Like, are you?
Right. It'd be like, this dude is weird, or like, this guy's a fucking asshole. Like,
right. So it's one of those things that it kind of he's very off-putting, but it really works in this movie because it forces you to kind of recognize that he's going through a lot of issues, and a lot of issues that some characters who maybe aren't as emotional are going through as well. I mean, think about some of the issues, not only that he's going through, but some of the other students going through. You have the bullies, right? They're bullies just be bullies, but everybody knows that a bully normally is because they've been bullied before, right? Donnie has schizophrenia for sure, and he has a whole bunch of issues that, for having such a loving family and actually having these issues, is again something that's almost unfamiliar, because we're so used to seeing it where it's like, oh, my family was shit. No, my family is fucking great. I just have some real mental health issues.
Yeah.
Like, okay. The other Gretchen has some serious issues with the dad being violent and nearly killing the mom, and then the mom disappearing at the end of the movie. Elizabeth, her whole thing is that she doesn't want to fall into the pressures of society, and while she may seem like the perfect girl, now all of a sudden she gets into Harvard, and that turns. So everybody is it's not at the skin where Donnie is. Instead, it's all kind of boiling up a little bit inside, and it's kind of eating away at people a little bit, and so it kind of really fucks with you a little bit. So
yeah,
I give it to Donnie, because Donnie, at least, as much of a character that I don't know if I actually like, he's definitely the most outstanding of all the characters.
Yeah, definitely.
That Chick Award, this was tough because there is a part of me that wants to give it to Kitty. because Kitty is consistent with her message. Like, and that's something I really like, because I can't tell you the amount of people, even in today's society, all you have to do is go on the internet, really, especially during election season, just kind of seeing how these people just kind of like perceive and view how the world really is. And it's like, it's for me, it's a view that I can't like connect with at all.
Uh-huh.
But I'm actually going to go ahead and give it instead to Drew Barrymore. And the reason why is because Drew Barrymore is doing the one thing that you're supposed to do as a teacher, and that's to explore new ideas.
Sure, challenge. Like
it's the challenge thinking.
Yeah.
And it forces every single one of those kids to really challenge the way of their thinking. You know, even if it may be just a simple idea of destruction, it can be a form of creation. It's something that, man, if teachers were like that, if every single teacher was like that for me through high school, I promise you, all of our students would have came out a lot smarter, at least.
I mean, I guess it's weird to kind of make this social commentary, but it's like not that far in the past, right? So it's like,
right, 88.
Right, like exactly. So it's like, yeah, challenging ideas means that you're less likely to fall for a big monolithic concept or idea, right?
Sure.
So it's like, even now, even the concept of being a conspiracy explorer, theorist, or someone who challenges ideas from the establishment isn't that challenging, because you're kind of just buying into the other side's narrative, right? Instead of thinking critically. So, read some books about rabbits killing each other. Read some shit that makes you uncomfortable. I don't know.
Yeah, you got to be willing to read the stuff that forces. It's not like Lord of the Flies, which Lord of the Flies I think is just an okay book at best. Anyway,
sure.
It's more like exploring some of those real hardcore philosophies in terms of like what was taught back in like Greek times, and like how does that connect to even nowadays. And you get the idea. Anyway, Drew Barrymore. Right, Drew Barrymore gets my answer.
Uh-huh.
That full award, I will go ahead and give it to Kitty, because Kitty is so consistent with her message.
Oh my God!
But Kitty,
yeah, she's definitely the henchman to, Cobra Commander or whatever.
No, she is Cobra Commander. I'm telling you, she's the type of person that in today's society, I would take zero responsibility for any course of her action and decide to blame all of her shortcomings on everybody else's action.
Sure. Every satellite revolving around me, they're the problem, not me.
Of course, because she thinks that she's the center of the universe. I mean, think about it. This is a woman that wants to defend a child sex pornographer who had physical evidence in his house simply because his house burnt down, and this is clearly flawed. Instead of trying to help out, I care so much about my daughter's health and education. This is kind of stuff that we read, but then you decide not to support her by being the chaperone to the girls out to Los Angeles so you can defend the child sex pornographer. So it's a lie. It's
right.
a huge
morality exists to justify what she wants to get done. Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't challenge her. Don't challenge her on anything.
Right, because if she had a moral compass, it would just be spinning constantly all the time, because she has no moral compass. Her moral compass is basically what interests her at that current point in time, and what resembles my message, more than anything else, instead of like, it's a very individualistic kind of thought, very Ayn Rand, if I want to go that far.
Ooh.
Cut that out. So there's not so much to really cut out. because this is kind of one of those movies that you need to make sure that you're paying to all parts of it
You're
to
right.
make sense. This is not a movie for those who are just like, all right, I'm just throwing this on. Because I guarantee you're going to say, I didn't like this movie. I'm going to be like, are you sure you didn't like this movie? You know, so I wouldn't really cut anything out. Instead, I would actually add more of a commitment to your ideas on the physics side, because
Oh, sure.
it was like they were there, with at least the general idea being there and being presented and could be talked about. But instead, they were just like, oh, okay, well, we're going to cut away to this. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's what
No,
drives me nuts.
like all the ingredients are there, but it's like you have to make the cake, right? You gotta blend the batter and put it in, grease the pan and put it in and bake it, right? So
Right.
that's
It's like watching a Damon Lindelof production.
oh sure.
Okay. Damon Lindelof is, in my eyes, one of the greatest storytellers that we can. But Damon Lindelof is never about the destination. It's always about the journey, right?
Sure.
How we got to this point, and then mystery and suspense belief, and suspend yourself a little bit into what you think might have actually happened.
Yeah, what was up with Lube, man?
I'm still convinced that guy's Speedy. Okay.
it is Petey, but it's like, what was the end game for that?
Move the man. But yeah, so that's the best way I could kind of describe that. So, it just didn't commit enough to the idea. Does it age well? I'm actually going to say it probably only has another shelf life of maybe 3 to 5 years, because
Wow.
because I think the idea of where the movie is going is good, but I think people are going to really start saying, okay, this feels a little bit dated with all this time travel, because now everybody is into the multiverse idea, right? It all started with Spider-Man into the multiverse, right?
Right.
It's like, okay, so really this old concept idea, that's old. This is how we really think this really is. And then people will point to Endgame like this is, like it should be the standard for it.
So what you're saying is the time. Okay, well,
It's probably got like 5 years before people are like, this feels super old.
yeah. I mean, look, I think maybe the reason why the time travel stuff's so ambiguous in this is so that way we don't focus on it so much. It's just it plays its part so that the story can be told and we can see the perspective of these characters. But yeah, compared to other movies where they kind of parse out the time travel better, I mean, shit, Back to the Future technically did it better, except for there's like a big plot hole in Back to the Future 2. But
Sure.
yeah, I hear you.
Finally, iconic scene. It's going to go pretty simply to the first hallucination, because it's so weird, but it really sets the tone for the rest of the film. When he looks down at the golf course and you're seeing 6, 40, you're seeing 28, 6, 12, and 42, and it's like, okay, so he drew that also, and it's just ticking timer at this point.
It's dope.
It's weird, but it's incredibly effective, because it's really jarring to see Frank the Rabbit, because you're like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And you
What's
kind of
up with this dude?
right, exactly. So I'll give it to that. But that is Donnie Darko. Let's get into some quick hits to kind of wrap this thing up. At the wrap party for the film, Seth Rogen and Jake Gyllenhaal agreed that they had no idea what the movie was about. Writer and director Richard Kelly came up with the idea of the future blobs while watching football. John Madden used to use a telestrator where he diagrammed a pause video to show where the players were about to go moments before letting the tape roll. Kelly watched this while high and started to think about what would happen hypothetically if someone upstairs was doing that to humans. Fittingly enough, Donnie first notices the future plots while watching football, of course.
Wow.
Seth Rogen.
That's awesome. That's all. I don't, like, let's go back to that in a second. It's like, so he's like, comes up with this crazy time travel theory while, like,
Right.
I'm watching jock stuff and I'm thinking about nerd shit.
He's like, wait a minute, what if God put a bubble here and like that's where you're supposed to go?
It's like, boom, this guy's here. Boom, this guy goes here. Gets sacked there.
All right. Seth Rogen's first line in any film is the line that he made in this movie, which is "I like your boobs," which is a Seth Rogen as a guest in my eye.
Yeah, but didn't like your dad like kill your mom?
Yeah, but he likes his boobs, you know. The words cellar door are written on the chalkboard in Karen Pomeroy's classroom. When Donnie asks about their meaning, she replies that this famous linguist once said, of all the phrases in the English language, of all the endless combination of words in all of history, that cellar door is the most beautiful. In the director's commentary, Richard Kelly mistakenly attributes this phrase to Edgar Allan Poe, but it was actually J.R.R. Tolkien, who said in a 1955 essay, who in his 1955 essay, English and Welsh, said that most English-speaking people will admit that cellar door is beautiful, especially if disassociated from its sense and from its spelling. More beautiful than, say, sky, and far more beautiful than beautiful. Interestingly, Lord of the Rings includes a country called Erador, E-R-I-A-D-O-R, and an elf nobleman named Celeborn, both of which sound similar to cellar door. So much information.
Some good hits on this movie.
Okay. There are many comic book references that show up through the film. Gretchen comments on Donnie's name as sounding like a superhero, to which he replies, "What makes you think I'm not?" Many characters have a ludicrous name. Donnie Darko, Charita Chen, Frankie Fiedler, Day Dennis, Joni James, Sean Smith, Donnie Dixon, like many comic book heroes like Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Susan Storm. Also, it is believed that Donnie is a superhero as he has powers and he uses them to save others.
He did somehow put an axe through a 15-foot tall statue.
Right. And I'll give you two more. Patrick Swayze portrays a charismatic educator prompting a questionable education course. Swayze was once a former Scientologist, and Scientology has an education program called Applied Scholastics. And finally, okay, cool. And finally, when Donnie's mother, Rose, asks Kitty if she has heard of Graham Greene, she replies that she has, and since she's seen Bonanza, 1959. However, Kitty is getting confused with Lorne Greene, who appeared in the series. Sam Raimi, who allowed the Donnie Darko production to use and distort a clip from his movie The Evil Dead, free of charge, is married to Gillian Greene, daughter of Lorne. There's also the native Canadian actor Graham Greene, who has appeared in many films portraying Native Americans, including Dances with Wolves. Graham Greene, the author, had many books adapted for films, including The Quiet American, which I've actually seen, Brighton Rock, and Our Man in Havana. And that's it. That is Donnie Darko. Lund, thank you. Thank you so much for filling in for this past month. You've been a real treasure and a real joy. People were actually...
I would like to say that you're welcome, and also thank you.
People were really questioning if you had actually replaced Jay, which I was kind of laughing about because I'm like, I like this idea that he just kind of like knocked out Jay. He's been on the floor asleep for like 4 weeks.
Yeah,
his spot.
Yeah, he's in my other bunker. No, no, we love Jay here. I can't wait for me and Jay to get back on the mic. I'm just hanging out so the brother can take a vacation, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, let the people know where they can find you.
All right, you could find me on Facebook, Leland Hairston. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Leland Hairston.
Very cool. And you can, a couple of things would be, a couple of announcements. First and foremost, for the time being, we are going to be postponing 20v20. Part of the reason why is because we've been having issues with copyright issues, and to be honest, it's getting to a point where it's got to make sense for us to really want to do it, and we need to change this up. But this Sunday, 5 p.m., we will be doing Fuck Out of Here, FOH3. This time, for the first time ever, collaborating all shows together, every member of Beat Network will be on this show to kind of share their opinions, unpopular opinions, on some very, very interesting topics. And all I'm going to say is coming out swinging. I'm coming out with sunglasses. I may be in a robe. I'm definitely going to have a cigar in my hand. I'm definitely going to be drinking tea. So everybody knows, and everybody's on notice now that they're aware this Sunday what you can kind of expect. Of course, you can always follow the Back to the Classics and Beat Network on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Music. So make sure that whatever way that you decide to stream us, or if you wish to watch us on YouTube, please make sure you go ahead and check out our profiles to ensure that you're getting direct access to that. Of course, the Back to the Classics Movie Talk group and the Back to the Classics Movie Talk page is still up and running. So pop on Facebook, kind of check out what's going on. A lot of interesting things that kind of coming through on that. A lot of fan activity with that. So hopefully we can get a little bit more stuff to kind of keep that fan engagement going on. And yeah, otherwise you can always find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at David Danger Nuff. I'm the co-host here at Back to the Classics. Next week we will be back as it starts up super throwback September, where all of our movies are going to be 20 years or older in this case, and it's going to be kind of a gangster's paradise, you can kind of say. With that being said, I am your host, Danger Nuff, and with me at least for this past month, and thank you so much again for being a part of it, is my guy,
Lund Hairston.
We will see you guys next week. This is Back to the Classics. Peace out.